Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we'll explore what Anareta is. One of the most cruel, complex, and terrifyingly human aspects of Anareta is the infected and the cannibals who inhabit this hopeless world. We're not talking about mindless monsters, but rather beings driven by hunger, desperation, and the total loss of morality. Creatures who have turned survival into a ruthless game where the only rule is to live one more day, no matter the cost. On one hand, the infected are not the typical slow, erratic zombies that wander aimlessly. No. Here, the virus has transformed people into aggressive, fast, and lethal creatures with a predator's instinct honed to perfection. And if the infected represent the horror of losing control over one's own body, the cannibals embody something even more disturbing: the conscious decision to abandon any trace of humanity. That's why in this video, I will explain in detail the history and origins of Anareta's infected and cannibals. To do so, I will first summarize their story in the short film. Then I will discuss their physical appearance, their personality, and their incredible abilities and known weaknesses. Let's imagine for a moment the life of an ordinary person. Someone who, like you or me, goes through the daily routine, hoping each day will be a repetition of the last. This person, our protagonist, enjoys a peaceful existence in a city that seems free of concerns. Their job is stable, their friendships are solid, and their life, in general, unfolds predictably. They are just another cog in the vast social machine, fulfilling their role without question. But what happens when the reality we know is shattered by the unexpected? When the ordinary turns into a threat and our very survival is at stake? This is the premise that invites us to reflect. Normalcy collapses when an unknown virus begins spreading through the city streets. At first, the cases are isolated, almost anecdotal. However, as the pathogen advances, the symptoms in those infected intensify, transforming them into aggressive beings devoid of reason and consumed by violence. It's a metamorphosis reminiscent of the creatures from Maze Runner, but with a more palpable brutality. The protagonist, witnessing this transformation, watches as their surroundings descend into chaos and despair. The city they once knew crumbles, giving way to a new reality where survival is the only law. Amid this disorder, the government introduces an experimental vaccine designed to slow the virus's spread in those who have not yet fully succumbed. However, the effectiveness of this solution is uncertain, and hope begins to fade. The tragedy deepens when our protagonist's father falls ill. He is separated from his family and taken to a quarantine center, a place meant to provide safety but which, in reality, becomes a prison of uncertainty and fear. This governmental action sows seeds of distrust among the population, who are already struggling to find reasons to keep going. The fight for survival goes beyond the virus itself. The real battle is fought in the human heart. The scarcity of essential resources, such as food, pushes people to unimaginable extremes. Morality erodes, and what was once unthinkable becomes a necessity for some. Cannibalism. Our protagonist witnesses unspeakable acts. Groups of individuals abduct others, murder them, and dismember them, treating them like livestock. The line between human and monster blurs, and society as we knew it disintegrates. In this new world, survivors are not allies but ruthless competitors, willing to do anything to secure their own existence. Amid this horror, the protagonist struggles to hold on to their humanity. Each day is an internal battle against the despair and savagery surrounding them. Is it possible to retain one's humanity when everything around us suggests otherwise? How far are we willing to go to survive? These are the questions they face as they navigate a world that has lost its way. This narrative invites us to reflect on our own nature and the circumstances that can bring out the worst or the best in us. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can shine, but it can also succumb to the shadows. Survival is not just a matter of physical existence, but also of moral and spiritual integrity. What are we willing to sacrifice to remain who we are? This is the reality our protagonist faces. After so much loss, humanity has been reduced to a handful of survivors, each struggling to stay alive. And in the midst of this desperation, our protagonist crosses paths with a mother and her daughter, two people who, in their vulnerability, represent what remains of a lost world. But things are not so simple. A group of cannibals approaches, eager to do them harm. The protagonist, in an act of bravery, intervenes, fighting with everything she has to save them. And she succeeds. With brutal strength, she defeats the attackers, giving the two women a chance to escape. Here, in this act of altruism, we see the essence of the protagonist. Someone who, despite everything, still believes she can make a difference. However, over time, that apparent connection fades. The daughter, paralyzed by fear, begins to distrust her. It's not hard to understand why. In such a ruthless world, anyone who does not share your pain, your suffering, becomes a threat. The fear of death makes you believe that betraying others is the only way to save yourself, to secure a future. And in a heartbreaking scene, the daughter, in her desperation to survive, hands her mother over to the cannibals. A betrayal that reminds us that in times of crisis, the rules change. Survival becomes a game where emotions and family ties dissolve quickly. As the story progresses, the protagonist, who had been a symbol of resilience and humanity, begins to face her worst enemy, herself. The virus, that invisible threat that destroys both bodies and minds, finally reaches her. It is a brutally poetic moment, because now our protagonist is no longer a mere spectator of the chaos. She is part of it. The pain of transformation consumes her, and although she tries to hold on to her humanity, it is only a matter of time before she becomes one of the creatures she once feared. It is fascinating how the story handles this shift, how the protagonist, in her internal struggle, reflects the battle within all of us. How far would we go to remain human when everything around us pushes us toward despair? The transformation is not only physical, but also psychological. It is about losing what makes us human, the ability to love, to feel empathy, to have hope. Now a shadow of what she once was, our protagonist, in her transformed state, encounters a group of refugees fighting to survive. But her primal instincts take over, and without thinking, she attacks. She no longer has awareness of her actions. She only follows her nature, to devour, to destroy, to consume. The humanity that once defined her is practically extinct. Yet amid the chaos, there is a spark of sacrifice. A man from the refugee group, knowing that the only chance to save a small girl is to give up his own life, does so. He hands over all his supplies and with a look of resignation faces the attackers, knowing that his death is inevitable. But he does it for her, for the girl, because in this dark world, the only way to find meaning is through sacrifice. And there, in that moment of despair, as she watches the girl flee, something strange happens. The protagonist, even as a soulless creature, seems to hesitate. Her nature compels her to hunt, to kill, but something inside her resists. Perhaps it is the last remnant of who she once was, or maybe it is something deeper. A desire, a will to see someone else escape this world of horror. She does not chase her. She does not kill her. She lets her go. It is in this moment that the story takes a direction few would expect. Humanity, that spark of goodness believed to be lost, does not completely vanish. There is something within us, something that cannot be extinguished, even when everything around us falls apart. It is resistance. the fight to preserve what makes us human, even when we are no longer who we used to be. Anareta is not just a story of survival. It is a profound reflection on what it means to be human in times of extreme crisis. The story shows us that when everything we know disintegrates, the only thing left is the internal struggle not to lose ourselves. And sometimes, that battle is not against the infected or the cannibals, but against ourselves. Morality becomes blurred, but the need to preserve our humanity persists. In a world without rules, sacrifices and betrayals are inevitable, but so is the ability to show compassion, even in the darkest circumstances. Anareta offers a grim vision of how crises can erode the structures that give meaning to our existence. It reminds us that in moments of despair, our humanity is put to the test, but that even in the worst scenarios, there is always a spark of hope. The protagonist, despite her transformation and the horrors she faces, continues to fight for that spark. Because even in absolute darkness, humanity can find a reason to keep going. The infected exhibit behavior that goes beyond what we typically expect from zombies or mutated creatures in apocalyptic scenarios. At first glance, they might seem purely wild and uncontrollable, but their true danger lies in their ability to act as a group in a surprisingly organized and efficient manner. They are predatory animals, but with an unrestrained level of aggression. The virus has altered their physiology, making their bodies faster, stronger, and more resilient. Their movements may be erratic, but they are not without purpose. Their primary motivation is survival, but they also have an insatiable need to consume, which turns them into relentless engines of destruction. The virus has not only changed their minds, but also their bodies. Their eyes are often bloodshot or completely opaque, as if humanity has completely vanished from their gaze. In some cases, the infected exhibit open sores, pale or grayish skin, bulging veins, and muscles tensed by the infection. Their mouths are often torn, with cracked lips or exposed teeth from biting their victims. Their nails have turned into sharp claws, used as lethal weapons. Some of them, those most affected by the mutation, develop deformities, such as elongated limbs or twisted torsos, making them even more terrifying in combat. But what truly makes them lethal is their organization. While most zombies in fiction are mindless creatures, these infected possess a level of coordination that makes them far more dangerous. They do not wander aimlessly. They stalk, surround, and strike at the perfect moment. In groups, they become an unstoppable force, capable of dismantling any survivor refuge or colony. If the infected represent the total loss of control and transformation into a mindless beast, the cannibals are the most terrifying reflection of what a human being is capable of when there are no rules, when morality has become an impossible luxury. Unlike the infected, cannibals look like any normal person. They have no deformities, no signs of disease, and no loss of mental control. However, what sets them apart is the conscious decision to hunt, kill, and devour other humans without remorse. To them, this is not an act of madness, but simply the new way of life in this broken world. While the infected attack with instinctive violence, the cannibals do so with precision. Many of them are armed, wielding machetes, rifles, and even chainsaws to dismember their victims. They often hunt in organized groups, ambushing survivors, capturing them, and taking them to their hideouts, where they carve them up alive. Some have even built entire communities based on cannibalism, establishing human farms and keeping prisoners to feed on them little by little. They feel no guilt, no compassion. To them, this is merely a matter of survival. And in this sense, they are even more terrifying than the infected, because while the infected have no control over their actions, the cannibals choose to do what they do. They are proof that the worst monster is not the one transformed by a virus, but the one who willingly abandons their humanity. This is where Anareta presents its rawest vision of human nature. The infected are a force of nature, unstoppable and brutal. They do not think, they do not choose, they only destroy. But the cannibals are something worse. They are humans who have chosen to become monsters. Both represent two sides of the same coin. The infected are the result of humanity's biological collapse, a reminder that evolution does not always mean progress. Sometimes, it is a regression into the most primal instincts. The cannibals are the representation of humanity's moral collapse, proof that in the absence of rules and consequences, people can become something far worse than any infected creature. In this devastated world, the line between being a victim and becoming a predator is thinner than ever. And the most disturbing question that Anareta leaves us with is, if you were in their place, how far would you go to stay alive? And that would be all we know so far about Anareta's universe and the infected. I honestly thought it would just be another zombie story, but the rawness and fragility with which the story unfolds made me think that this might actually be how a real zombie pandemic could play out. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Did you already know about Anareta's infected? Do you think creatures or people this atrocious and cruel could really exist? And finally, if you found yourself in the same situation, what would you do? Share your answers to these questions and your overall opinion on Anareta's universe. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it. If you liked it, share it to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of my new videos.